The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Hinckley and Bosworth once again. Now, to finish off this run this week, I've got two very big villages for you. We're going to see the biggest of the bunch tomorrow, but let me tell you, this one's not much smaller. This one used to have a bus depot, believe it or not, and you'd be very hard pushed to know exactly where that bus depot was if you didn't do a bit of research beforehand. I, though, know where it was, and I'll show you as we walk around Barlestone. Barlestone, Beornwulf's farm. For your Thursday episode this week, we have the largest village so far in Hinckley and Bosworth. This is Barlestone, which has a population well in excess of 2,500 people. This is a bit of a mixed bag. You can split Barlestone into at least three distinct sections. Firstly, there's the village centre, which grew up along one long main street that ran between Osbaston Tollgate in the west and Newbold Verdon in the southeast. Most of the early part of the village formed in the 17th century or perhaps before. Either side of the main street are much newer areas, housing that's greatly expanded the look and feel of the place, transforming it into a large commuter village. New builds are still going up today, the most recent ones further extending Barlestone to the northeast. Barlestone's population historically worked in the local coal mines, despite the fact that the village itself never had a pit of its own. Mine workers living in Barlestone would often travel to pits in Bagworth, Colville and Newbold Heath. In the late 1980s, a pit wheel from one of the local coal mines was installed in Barlestone to commemorate the miners who lived here. Other landmarks around the place include two pubs, namely the Red Lion and the Three Tons, and several shops including a co-op, two hairdressers, a fish and chip shop and a couple of takeaways. Anchoring it all is the impressive St Giles Church, designed by the Gothic Revival architect Ewan Christian, dating from 1855. There's plenty more, let me tell you, and this one's definitely not a tiny village. Let's get moving and see what Barlestone is all about. Okay, let's get the ball rolling today outside Barlestone Garage on the road east out of the village towards Newbold Verdon. There's not a great deal to tell you about this place, but fear not. Whilst researching this, I stumbled across some information about a second sort of garage that Barlestone once had. More on that later. Let's head up Newbold Road, which will take us into the village centre, and we'll fill in a bit of history whilst we walk. The earliest records of Barlestone's existence are in the Domesday Book. At the time, it was named Barulveston, and it was held by two landowners, Hugh de Grentminol and Robert de Buchy. The population would have been around 60 people. De Grentminol owned Market Bosworth and was one of the largest landowners in the country back then. There were windmills in the village in the 13th century. The first record of one dates from 1221, and it's believed to have been sited on a mound along a footpath to Nailstone, which crosses a field called Mill Hill. The farmhouses and cottages back then would have all been built of stone, the same kind that was used to build the church. Some houses were roofed with slate from the quarries of Swithland. A lot were thatched, but today there are no houses in Barlestone with such a roof. The last one was demolished in 1947. Some of Barlestone's glebe land was formerly known as the Cunnery or Conery. That's a word that simply means rabbit warren. This land would later be tenanted by Abraham Wright, a royalist who fought in the Civil War against Oliver Cromwell. For centuries, Barlestone was an agricultural community, but in around 1700, its main industrial activity began to change. That's when knitting frames were first introduced here. Most of their operators were engaged in the making of traditional wrought hose or fully fashioned stockings. Largely, this was an additional occupation, often combined with agriculture. In 1804, Nathaniel Cora of Bagworth opened a knitting frame business in Barlestone, which is believed to have been situated in Main Street. This business was moved in 1814 to St Nicholas Street in Leicester. Consequently, Barlestone was virtually the cradle of one of the largest firms in Leicester. On a religious theme, it's believed that Joseph Smith, one of the founders of Mormonism in Salt Lake City, Utah, had associations with Barlestone. Staying on that religious theme, our first landmark in the village centre is the former Primitive Methodist Chapel, which was built in 1833. It's a house these days. So the old chapel has got the ball rolling here in Barlestone, but you haven't got time to catch your breath in this particular part of the village because all the landmarks are clustered together. There's a pub to see in a moment, there's an old chapel to see, and there's also a chapel that used to be a pub, if that makes sense. Plus, there's a few other bits and bobs too. Let's have a look at it all. Okay, next we have the Red Lion. This is one of the two remaining public houses in Barlestone, the other being the Three Tons. There used to be others. In the past there were 4. The other 2 were the Jolly Toper and the Crown. The Red Lion has had somewhat of a varied past. It may be a pub today, but for a while it was an Indian restaurant. Before that it was another pub, again called the Red Lion, rather confusingly. Just up the street there are 2 more religious buildings, although one of them might not be immediately obvious. This here is one of those former pubs. This was the Jolly Toper. These days the building is occupied by the Elohim Church. Elohim is a term we haven't yet met before. It's a Hebrew word typically translated as gods or God, and it's used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to the God of Israel. Whilst grammatically plural, it's generally understood as a plural of majesty, referring to the one and only God. The term's use and meaning have been debated and interpreted differently throughout history. Here in Barlestone, the Elohim Church first began meeting in the primary school's hall in 1993, and it wasn't until 2009 that it was able to purchase its own premises. Over the road is the other religious building, this one facing directly down Newbold Road. This is the Baptist Chapel. Baptist worship was reinvigorated in this part of Leicestershire in the mid to late 18th century. It was a direct result of missionary activities by the pastors from nearby Barton in the Beans. Barlestone's first General Baptist Chapel was built in 1798. Prior to that, services were held in various residences around the village. A record from 1706 states that their minister was a man named Bunny, and they had a congregation of around 20 people who met weekly or fortnightly. The first Baptist chapel was large, with seating for around 250 people. It's not the current building though. This was rebuilt in splendid style in 1865, occupying this prominent position on Main Street. There can be no denying that this is a village that has a lot of facilities. Virtually next door to the chapel is Barlestone Fish Bar. This is just the tip of the iceberg though. Next door there's a Chinese takeaway and then a hair salon. There's also a second salon which you may have clocked as we approach this area. You see what I mean? It's all clustered together. Well, there's a bit of a respite from that now because it's mainly residential for this next part as we make our way up towards the church. Although we do need to talk a little bit about some of the streets that we're walking on, because some of the names are quite interesting and they used to be called something else in times past. Next, we're forming a loop around the eastern end of the village by using a road called Washpit Lane. Now, many roads around Barlestone were named quite differently in the past. Washpit Lane is one of them. It was alternatively referred to as Windmill Lane because it used to lead to the windmill that stood in the field directly opposite the junction of Bosworth Road and the A447. The Washpit name holds the biggest clues to Barlestone's agricultural past. The lane did indeed have a washpit where sheep and other livestock used to be cleaned. It was situated at the far end of the road. There was also a roundhouse or pinfold where stray cattle were kept until they were claimed by their owners. Now we're at the church dedicated to St Giles. St Giles was one of the most popular saints in England in medieval times, and as such the dedication here is not unusual. He lends his name to over 160 churches across England. He's the patron saint of cripples, beggars and blacksmiths. The first mention of a church in Barlestone came in around 1225. That would have been a very small stone building surrounded by about 20 small cottages and a large wood. By the mid-1800s, that building had become very dilapidated, and in 1855 it was almost completely rebuilt, with the exception of its chancel. The rebuilding cost £1,367, a sum that was raised principally by the Reverend Henry Homer. The present-day church is the only one in the entire country that was designed by Benjamin Ferry, an architect from London. The work was carried out by J&G Lilly of Measham and a Mr. J. Elliott of Ashby. The material used was Markfield granite, and the font was constructed from an exquisite piece of Ancaster stone. The roof is covered with Staffordshire tiles. The porch over the south door is of solid English oak on a base of masonry, surmounted by a cross. The chancel is still the original 14th century building, and the east window still remains in the geometrical style of the mid-1300s. The windows also date from this time. The tower and the spire resemble a dovecote, and the main structure has been retained as Early English. There are two bells in the tower. A cross appears on one of them, which was the mark used by Austin Breacher, a London founder in the 15th century. The bell was probably cast at around 1520, making it one of the oldest in the country. The second bell is dated 1755 and was founded by Thomas Headley. So that little footpath that you saw just there brings you into another little housing estate, and next to check out is the doctor's surgery before we turn back into the village centre and check out the rest of it, because like you will have noticed, Barlestone village centre is all clustered together and we've only seen half of what's there so far. There's still quite a bit more to cover down there. I thought it was best to split it into two sections because there's just so much in one area. So, doctor's surgery. After using a footpath from the churchyard, we passed the local doctor's surgery on Westfields, and now we're heading back towards the village centre to check out the rest of it. This is the other pub that's still going here, the Three Tons. This well-known pub has a history dating back to at least the 18th century. Whilst specific details about the building's earliest construction are limited, it's believed to have been a pub from at least 1782. The name Three Tons refers to the large wooden casks used for storing beer or wine. Over the years, the pub has been owned by various breweries and individuals, but it's always served as a gathering place for residents and a destination for visitors from the surrounding area. The pub is known for its connections to the local St Giles football club, which we'll meet shortly. I'm sure you noticed the Leicester City flag flying outside the pub there. You've kind of got Hobson's choice when it comes to football here in Leicestershire, because Leicester City are the only Football League team in the county. So there you go. Now then, next we've got some shops to see. More specifically, the Co-op, which is just away over there. This large Co-op store has always been a shop, despite the appearance of the building. It was opened in 1922, a date which can be seen in two parts either side of its central header. Information about it is a little scant, but we do know it was built and opened by the Colville Working Men's Cooperative. The house immediately next door used to be called Co-op House, and there was a lock-up shop built to the left-hand side of the front door, which housed hardware items. As well as the Chinese we saw earlier, you can get a curry in Barlestone too, thanks to the Darwat Indian restaurant a few steps away. This is on the junction of West End, Barton Road and Bosworth Road. On the small green in front of the Indian restaurant is a miner's memorial. Barlestone lies in an area rich with minerals, especially coal. Despite that fact, the place never had its own coal mine. That didn't stop miners from living here though. This memorial was installed on the green in the 1980s. As we know already, in the early 19th century, many Barlestone inhabitants were employed in the hosiery industry, but the population expanded rapidly from 1871 onwards, following the opening of new coal mines in the area. The 1841 census only recorded 2 miners living in Barlestone. They would have worked at either Ibstock Mine, which was sunk in 1825, or at Bagworth Colliery, which opened a year later in 1826. This had dramatically changed by 1872, when the population of Barlestone had grown to 602 people. At that point, there was an ever-increasing number of people working in the mines. There would have been a lot of dogs around here too at that point. It was a tradition within the mining community to own a good dog which was capable of catching a rabbit. A lot of people owned them for the sport of racing too. Okay, next job is to get Barlestone marked off this Hinckley and Bosworth list. We're down to 20 now, because there's 24 in this particular district, and this is the 4th one. So here's a card, and there's a parish notice board. You know what that means. There we go, Barlestone in the books. Now we're on Barton Road, and this is another road that used to have a different name. Records from 1638 refer to it as Little Lane, and by 1674 it had become Coal Pit Lane, spelt like Old King coal, not the black stuff from under the ground. There's a few bits of interest along here, including the village's main cemetery. It took over from the churchyard at St Giles for burials when that became full. It's quite extensive, stretching a fair way back from the road. Just inside the cemetery gates is the Barlestone Circle of Life sculpture, created by the artist Barry Mason. It's part of his Helios series, which explores the movement of the sun and time. The sculpture is designed to be illuminated by the sun at specific times of year, creating a sculptural calendar. The sculpture's design and placement are intended to mark the passage of time and celebrate the sun's path. Next, and up an adjacent track, there's a sports club to see. This is the home ground of St Giles Football Club, who take their name from the church. The first 11 play matches on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, whilst their ladies and junior sections play games on Sundays. St Giles have played in various Midland leagues since the mid-1980s, including the Leicestershire Senior League, the Midland Combination, and most recently, the Leicestershire County League. Okay, the other side of the drive that leads to the football ground, we have a school, and here it is on the roadside on the Barton Road there. Let's check this out next. Barlestone C of E Primary School is a co-educational establishment with around 200 pupils between the ages of 4 and 11. According to its latest Ofsted rating, this is a good school. Most of its graduates transfer to either the Market Bosworth School or Bosworth Academy in Desford. Education in Barlestone can only be traced back to 1843. Prior to that, there was no school in the village. That said, in 1564, Nicholas Harding, a Barlestone landowner, granted some of his land to support a teacher to instruct the boys and small children of Market Bosworth. That would lead to the founding of Dixie Grammar School, which is still going strong today. One of Barlestone's first schoolmistresses was a lady called Miss Godfrey. In 1877, she was dismissed when it was discovered she didn't hold a teaching certificate, even though she completed 30 years' service at the school. This is Little Mill Close off Barton Road, close to the school. It's a newish housing estate and it occupies the site of a major Barlestone institution. For almost 80 years, this land was occupied by Gibsons Bus Depot, a much loved and treasured part of Barlestone's past. If you live in Leicester, you too might remember Gibsons. Here's a bit about them. Gibsons was the brainchild of two brothers named Walter and Edward. They were two coal miners who first came up with the idea of buying a bus in 1919. Their plan was to use it to ferry themselves and workmates to and from the local coalfields, a very sensible plan. Their first bus was nicknamed Misery because it didn't like to go up steep hills. Quite often, those that rode on it had to get out and push. In time, they purchased a newer, better second bus, which became lovingly known as Comfort because it was so much more luxurious. That's where the trademark Comfort Buses was born. In 1922, the brothers decided to run a bus service for the public. They purchased a third, brand new bus and began running a 3-day-a-week service to the Blue Boar Public House in Southgate Street in Leicester, picking up in Newbold Verdon and Desford along the way. By 1928, the service was running to Castle Street and was taking in 3 more villages: Carlton, Barden and Nailston. It ran every day of the week and the brothers had to buy more buses to add to the fleet in order to keep up with demand. In 1931, the Gibsons engaged Mr. T.H. Mills of the Trent Motor Traction Company to manage their business. Mills later became a director. During World War II, Gibsons became PSV Limited and their offices were based in an old telephone exchange at Rutland Street in Leicester. In 1949, the company had their first double-decker bus. It was a second-hand ex-London transport vehicle purchased from a depot in Stratford-on-Avon. The company went on to purchase several more ex-London transport double-deckers over the years, as well as 1 or 2 brand new ones. 1952 saw 2 more services added to their routes, including a Wednesday and Saturday one from Market Bosworth to Leicester via Peckleton, and a Friday service from Newbold Verdon to Colville via Bagworth and Ellistown. By this time, they were also delivering parcels and villagers' laundry to 2 dry cleaning shops in Leicester. By the early 70s, Gibsons had a fleet of 13 buses employing 17 people. The bus depot throughout all of this time was still Barton Road Garage in Barlestone. The premises was sold to Leicester City Transport in July 1979, and although it still operated in the same way, the Gibson name was a subsidiary. Midland Fox later bought and closed the garage in 1993, so ending the local history of Gibson Brothers of Barlestone, or Comfort Buses if you will. Now gone, the depot's entrance is the end of Little Mill Close, and if you live on that street, you're literally residing where one of Leicestershire's most loved public transport services used to be. Okay, so we're continuing west now from the site of the bus station, bus garage, bus depot, whatever you want to call it, and it'll take us towards the A447. Of course, we're not going all the way to the A447 because, as you know from earlier this week, that end of Barlestone actually falls within Osbastone's boundaries. It involves the dentist and another shop. So if you haven't seen that episode, then have a look at Tuesday's episode just gone and you'll see that bit of Barlestone there. What we're going to do is follow Barton Road until we meet a road on the left hand side that will take us into another housing estate and down towards the village hall and the sports and community centre. From this point onwards, it's a case of making our way back towards the start. To do that, we have to pass through a maze of residential streets that dominate the south and west of Barlestone. Although I couldn't nail down exactly when it was built, Barlestone Community Centre is brand new, having only recently been constructed on the edge of the main playing field. It was built as an extension to a much smaller building, which is still here, in front of it. At the same time, it also replaced Barlestone's old village hall on Barton Road. Now demolished and replaced with a house, it was located right next door to the cemetery. The centre's development is closely tied to the broader Barlestone neighbourhood plan, which aims to guide the village's development for the next 2 decades. The playing field itself is a great open space for the many residents of the village's southern and western housing estates, and it includes the Barlestone Bowls Club in one corner. It's also got a tennis court and a decent-sized playground. Okay, it's pretty much all residential now, back to the start. Barlestone is a big village, and yeah, with it being a big village with a high population, all these people have got to live somewhere. Let's check out these final few housing estates before we make our way back to Barlestone Garage, where this all started. Our route to the finish on Newbold Road will take us via Manor Road, Spinney Drive and Meadow Road. There's lots more 20th century housing coming your way right now. Well, there we go, folks. That's Barlestone. That's the first real big village which we've tackled so far in Hinckley and Bosworth. But it's nowhere near as big as the one we're going to walk around tomorrow. Join me down the road for an absolute monster. And we're done with Barlestone, everybody. There's one more left this week before we bring this initial Hinckley and Bosworth run to its end. Join me down the road for another big village, this time one that's had a few windmills here and there, along with coal mines. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.